to me, I think probably the part of the story that everyone wants to know that they've been suffering through the rest of this podcast to get to.
I was trying to make him suffer more.
Is to talk about. Let's talk about your state champion run, because I know I have a real desire for this story to be told, and we will not be able to tell the whole story in this small amount of time that we have. Am I revealing too much if I say that you were working on a book, or you were thinking about working on a book?
No.
Okay.
Well, no. I've been working on it for a while. I went to school for writing, so I started it there, which was a mistake, and I haven't really touched it since. So I got to sit down and really do it. It's it'd be a conscious decision I'm going to do this. And it's in my head, but I just haven't sat down to do it. So you're not revealing too much. You're just not revealing a whole lot.
Okay. Okay. So I also have a desire to do a whole podcast series where we talk to, take 10 episodes to talk to everybody that was involved and tell the whole story, because there's a tremendous amount of story to be told. But just for starters, you guys, you come out, what was before any games happened, what was your preseason expectation for how good that team was going to be?
For me personally, or from outside expectations?
Both. And how did yours match up with what other people thought?
Well, we were slightly insulted because we felt the outside perception was we'd graduated a great 2011 team. There were, I don't know how many seniors were on that team, but it was double digits at least. And then this huge triple overtime loss in the Dome. And so I think a lot of people were down on us, but internally felt exactly the same. And I think every year since and every year before, it's always exactly the same. We're going to go out there, we're going to play to the best of our ability, and we expect to win every game. And that's exactly what we felt going into the season, despite what other people thought. What some people don't know, I don't know about you guys, but we took three huge losses going into the season, all linemen. Oh, wow. So Blake Wargo, whose older brother is Jackson Wargo, younger brother Donovan Wargo, I don't think he played, but Jackson Wargo played at Central for a year. He was 6'8", 300 pounds lineman. He was an animal, and his brother was a little bit smaller, but also a large human being, and he did not play. I think he'd played every year up until then. And so we lost him for the entire season. We lost Robert Sprinkle for half the season because he went to do ROTC stuff elsewhere. And then we also lost Nathan Nussbaum.
He broke his arm or something, right?
Double wrist dislocations.
I remember seeing him with the two casts on the sideline.
We called him Hellboy because he had we lost him in the spring before that season. It took him all summer and part of the fall to get back. And I was there for that accident. Actually, it was in weights. At the end of the school year.
I think I heard about
I could
that.
describe it to you if you'd like me to.
No, thank you.
I think we're good. But so, knowing, and you described Noose as a football guy, so that had to have just been brutal for Nathan to go through not being able to play. But so preseason expectation, internally you guys feel like, hey, we're going to go, number one, we're going to go out and do our best, but hey, we can compete with anybody. Externally, people were looking at you like, oh, this team might not be quite up to snuff. So then you start out 1-2, including a loss that you had to watch Nolan Hoynes break his school's rushing record. Daniel and I were both there that day, and Nolan was unconscious good that day. And I had never felt like watching a Monty team that nobody could catch somebody, and that day, nobody could catch Nolan. So you start the season 1-2, and we'll talk about the fire in a minute. But just on the field, how were you guys feeling after that start?
We weren't very good. We were not very good, and that's the best way to put it. We beat Aberdeen 31-8 the first game of the season, and honestly, we didn't play very well. And so we knew going into the next few weeks that we had Cascade Christian and then Hoquiam, and we weren't comfortable with where we were, and it bit us. Obviously, we had a lot of people playing different positions that if you were to look at those first three games, there were guys playing positions that they weren't playing in the title game. So we moved a lot of guys around, but we weren't very good. We felt like we were representing this great dynasty of a football team, and we felt like we'd failed it. Even with the first non-league loss because we hadn't lost a non-league game in however many years, and then to lose our first league game, we hadn't lost a league game in more years than our non-league games, and so we were pretty down. Like after the Cascade Christian game, which was a close game, we had a shot to win it at the end. There were people crying in the huddle in the end zone because that just doesn't happen to us. And then after the Holcomb game, it was a low point. It was a very, very low point for us, and we had a choice to make, and we made it, and it worked out in the end. But at that point in time, we were not a very good football team, despite our own expectations, despite knowing that we had replaced all those very, very good senior football players from the year before with very, very good senior football players that year, but we just weren't there yet.
So you guys have almost immediately after the Hoquiam game, there's the grandstands fire. Your grandstands are annihilated. You didn't get to play home games back there right away, although you did kind of later in the season get to return. There was a point when things turned, because did you lose again the rest of the year? So what point, what do you think was the pivotal thing, or some pivotal things that happened that changed things? Because if you look at the rest of your schedule, you guys tore some teams apart. So what was the difference?
Well, I think it was a combination of things. The obvious answer is you lose your grandstands, and that's a huge rally point for our community. I mean, a lot of people go to those football games, and so arguably losing the grandstands hurt more than losing the game, because it felt more like a blow to the community than anything else.
For sure.
So not only did we have to pull ourselves up, but we were actively thinking about, we got to do this for the community now at this point in time. And so it really started with the Woodland game, which ironically we started poorly. We fumbled a kickoff. I threw an interception, and we were down in the first quarter of that game. And then there wasn't an active point during the game that something turned, but if you were to look at the whole season as a whole, the turning point was in the middle of that first quarter of the game. Nobody said anything that turned the tide. It just happened. And at that point in time, we'd also moved positions. We'd done a lot of things strategically that were different than the first 3 games of the season. Something to point out that we turned on, it was the fire, obviously, and losing the grandstands was a big deal for us.
Did you guys have like a lot of times teams have like a mantra or a slogan or a motto? Did you guys have something?
Yeah, my dad, Coach Jensen, came up with it. It was we started walking around school with buckets, because we were on a sinking ship. That was the metaphor. We were 1 and 2, and we had a choice. We could either go down with this ship and give up, or we can start bailing water and get ourselves out. And so I think I might have been the only one. Me and Noose were the only ones, but the mantra was throughout the team. We literally went to school every day with these buckets. I walked to class every day with a bucket. And it said something on it, but I don't remember what it was. It was like, "Where's yours?" And we were just bailing water, trying to get better every day, because we didn't have a choice. And so
It's pretty brilliant, really. Like, it's a pretty cool, like, that's for a team that's not used to feeling like you're on a sinking ship, not used to having a losing record, and all of a sudden you start 1 and 2. It's pretty cool that, that was like the rallying cry.
Actually, I think I remember. It said "I'm all in." Period. Where's yours? ? Referencing the bucket. And so I carried that to class every day through the end of the season.
I remember.
I still have it, by the way. It's in
nice.
storage. Yeah.
That's
Very
awesome.
nice.
I remember hearing about that story, when we were getting into the playoffs of that year. I remember hearing about that story and bailing water and not wanting to let the ship go down. What I didn't think about is what you mentioned earlier, was that you guys felt like you were kind of failing this dynasty that came before you. Do you think that, you lived through that, and it obviously sounds like you guys had some pressure from the years before you. Do you feel like every Monty team kind of feels that pressure going into a year, that you don't want to let down the years before you almost?
I would say certainly, ever since our friend Adam Little Mountain came through the program.
I love that.
My sophomore year, every year the team comes up with an acronym, and we get our break, 1, 2, 3 dogs, 1, 2, 3 acronym, whatever it was. My sophomore year, it was FTB, which was for those before. And so certainly every team to ever come after this guy definitely looks back and says, well, we got to uphold the standard, and they do, and they hold themselves to it. And sometimes, I mean, we haven't won a state title every year, but it's more about, representing yourselves in the way Monty football players are supposed to.
And I think also, like you mentioned, the community and how you guys wanted to do it for the community. People who live in small towns, or I think it's even more true in Montesano than it is in a lot of towns. The football field on Friday night is like one of the few community hubs we have. Like, that's how we socialize with the people that are our neighbors and our friends. And I mean, a lot of it does revolve around sports, because the other community hub I can think of is the Little League field. Like, that's where you see people, that's where you connect with people. So there's the pressure of doing it for the community. Now, as you guys are on a roll and you head into the playoffs, let's say regular season's over, you're getting ready to gear up for state playoffs. What's your mentality? What did you feel like your team was capable of? Because you guys were absolutely not a favorite going into we talked about outside public perspective. I think if you asked most of the people who are involved in the local sports community, they thought Hoquiam was better than you. That 2012 Hoquiam football team was absolutely stacked. So knowing that they're out there and that Kings is out there, and Kings has a quarterback that's committed to play at a Division I school, and then you have Royal who's undefeated, top ranked, and been romping people all year. What's your expectation? What did you think before the state playoffs you guys were capable of? Do you have a legal situation and need someone on your side? Let the law office of Jeffrey A. Damasiewicz be your advocate. If you've been the victim of medical malpractice, suffered a personal injury, or need representation with real estate law, small business law, or estate planning, let Jeff Damasiewicz put his 29 years of experience to work for you. Call Jeff Damasiewicz today at 360-612-3991 or visit damasiewiczlaw.com. That's DAMASIEWICZLAW.com.
A lot of things. Number one, we were aware of the outside expectation, and we, of course, used it to fuel ourselves. We were aware of the expectation, and then we denied the expectation because we knew what we were capable of. We knew we had changed as a football team from weeks 1 through 3 to where we were then, and we wanted Hoquiam.
I was just going to ask you
We
that.
wanted
I was
him
just going to ask you that.
so bad, and it's super easy to say that in hindsight, but it would have been
You ask a
super
Hoquiam kid,
easy.
they wanted you.
Yeah.
Everybody
super
wanted
easy to
that.
say it in hindsight, but I think it would have been a better game. I personally played like garbage against them when they torched us at home, and we wanted them real bad, but we were also happy to play Kings because they were ranked number 1 in the state too.
Yeah.
So bring it on, When I look back, we have the bracket. There's a canvas bracket from, I don't know if they hung it up in the Tacoma Dome or whatever it was, but we got a hold of it. And if you look at our route to the title game compared to the route of all the other teams, I would argue it was the most difficult.
The gauntlet.
Because we played Charles Wright. Well, we played Castle Rock in the crossover. And then we played Charles Wright, who monstrous private school. They're not known as a football powerhouse, but at the time, their offensive line averaged like 290 pounds a piece.
I remember thinking that.
That's a school that's been up and down.
Yeah.
So they're a bigger school.
I think, no. They're a
Okay.
small private school, but I think they're really good at basketball.
Okay.
I remember going to that game, though, and looking at the kids that were on, the size of your line compared to their line, and it was like, these kids don't look like they should be playing the same sport.
They were massive.
Yeah.
And so we had to play them. And then, of course, we were either going to play Hoquiam or Kings. And both
And either one of
teams
those would be brutal.
were spectacular. And then we had to play Mount Baker, who that year I think was very underrated and has gone on to do well in the playoffs since. And then, of course, we had to play Royal. And so the path, it sounds sort of braggadocious, and I don't want to come off like that, but the path to get there, I think, was brutal.
That makes sense when you think that the outside perspective was not expecting Monty to do much. And I think that also ties into like the rankings. So all of the people you had to get to were ranked, or not all of, but most of the people you had to get to were ranked higher. And then the fact that you were on the side of the bracket that had both Hoquiam and Kings, and then Mount Baker, and then Royal, which for a while I've called Monty East. But you could also make the argument that Monty is Royal West, but it's very similar.
I like that one better.
they're similar situations, but I mean, you didn't face any like newbies. You faced like experienced, ranked programs going through that gauntlet, especially, and then Kings. You look at, I mean, having covered both of those games, like because I covered the Hoquiam Kings game, and then watching what happened in that game, and then when we were coming into Monty Kings at Stewart Field, Ian and I were so excited because we had seen the improvement that you guys had made coming into that game, and all we could think of was, what is this defense going to do to confuse this or to go up against this quarterback? Because what we watched Hoquiam go through the week before was they just tried to line up their athletes and let them play. But with our history of covering Monty, we figured that there'd be something a little bit more in-depth going into that game plan against Kings.
It's sort of similar to what we might expect in the Super Bowl this year. If you're going against an elite quarterback, you can't drop 8 and expect to win. Pressure's got to come from somewhere, and if you don't have pressure, he's going to sit back there and chuck the ball around, and that's what he did to Hoquiam. We analyzed that game. It's like burned into my memory, and Hoquiam should have won that game. And I don't mean to take a shot. That sounds like a shot. It's not supposed to be, but they were better than Kings, but they dropped 8, and they tried to beat them with coverage in a 3-man rush. And if you're playing against a team that has a Division I quarterback, do you think that team's going to be able to protect that quarterback?
Yes.
You think that's their number one priority? Absolutely, and you're not going to be able to get to him with 3 guys. And so, yeah, Brian dialed it up. Pressure from...
Talking about Brian Hollett's defensive coordinator, right?
Yeah, yes.
Just for listeners.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
My apologies.
No, that's good.
No, that's our job. You just say whatever you want.
Exactly.
He had it dialed. Billy Green didn't know where it was coming from. The ball was wet. After the game, I think Kings tried to tell us that he'd broken his hand in the game, and that's why
I never heard that.
That's why he couldn't throw the ball. But there's no way, because if you break your hand, you just can't even grip it. And he was throwing the ball all game. So,
I heard that excuse brought up as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I had the exact.
That could have been to
stats.
protect his scholarship.
I wish I had the exact stats, but it was there was one big play, and if you took that play away, I think he had less than 100 yards throwing. I don't want to put words in Brian's mouth, but I think at one point he said that was like the crown jewel of his defensive career. Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, it showed. In
stark contrast to the defense that Hoquiam played. Like, you guys did something you saw what happened in that game, and you saw something that was really different. You saw that you needed to do something really different. Yeah. Do you attribute that win to the defensive game plan, or was there something else in that game that you thought was really significant? Because to me, that's, besides the state title game, that's the most interesting game from this season.
Well, we only scored 17 points, so it had to be, and they scored 7. The number 1 offense in the state scores 7 points. It was clearly the defensive scheme, and you got to attribute that to Brian totally, and the coaching staff. Classic Monty coaching staff, just being presented a problem and finding a solution creatively, what have you. We do it at halftime. We do it in the week leading up to games. It's one of the keys to our success.
I think that kind of is a weird look at, not weird, but also an interesting look at how that team kind of progressed through the playoffs too, because you said you only scored 17 points. It seemed like after that game, the offense kind of took off again throughout the playoffs.
Yeah.
Whereas even in the state title game, you guys were down for a while.
And I would say, as a side note, I remember conversations that Daniel and I had, and I know you don't want to be braggadocious and I don't want to embarrass you, but during the season, as the regular season was winding down, Daniel and I were going, man, this team has a chance because they can pass the ball. Like, how many times have you seen one of our local teams that's really good, but's really focused on running? They get into the playoffs, it's cold, it's wet, whatever you're playing against better defenses, whatever the circumstance is, you become a one-dimensional team. So from our perspective, and I don't expect you to respond to this because I know you want to stay humble, but we thought and said at the time,
multiple times
during the regular season, hey, if this team gets over the hump, it's going to be because of the play of Matthew Jensen. Even though you had 2 1,100-yard rushers on your team and your running game was amazing, you guys focused on making sure that even when you were winning by 50 points in the second quarter or whatever, like when you guys had your regular season games, you worked your passing in because you guys knew you were going to need it come playoff time. So like Daniel was saying, you guys kind of romped offensively for a lot of it besides the Kings game. So explain kind of a little bit about like what the offensive game plan was. Like what were the key things offensively that you guys tried to do, or did it range game to game?
I mean, depending on how alignments, coverages, things like that. Of course, it changed, but we didn't really do anything drastically different from game one. We were gonna run dominant, of course, and because we're run dominant, that means we can hurt you with the pass. No, nothing was really that different. But I mean, you talk about being able to throw the ball. The only reason you're able to throw the ball is because you can run the ball.
Also, it helps to have a quarterback who can throw the ball.
Yeah.
But even so, I mean,
he's classically Monty trained. Do you hear this?
Yeah, he is. And the reason why I say that is because I've seen Monty teams that can run the ball before, and they haven't been able to throw as well.
There's been good throwing teams too, but I'm just saying, like, it's. Yeah. I just want you to know it's something we identified as it was happening.
So we can brag on ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, when it was happening, it didn't feel any different for us.
Okay.
It was just, we were just doing our thing.
Now, here's the question everybody wants to know, and we'll get into the state title game in a second because that'll be really fun to talk about. Monty runs an RPO now, right?
Yeah.
They did not run an RPO then. So how many touchdown passes did you throw in your senior season? 24,
Wait, you
22?
didn't run an RPO? I thought that was the first time I saw an RPO. I thought for sure I saw you running an RPO that year.
Not a true RPO.
Okay.
No. That didn't come around until 2 years ago.
So let's say you threw, was it 24 touchdown passes?
This is 22 on
22.
This paper.
Okay, so had your coach dad installed the RPO that season, how many touchdown passes would Matthew Jensen have thrown? Because I'm going to set the over-under at 50.
I'm not even gonna approach that question.
Well done.
I mean, it's
tried
a read,
to trap
right?
him and he didn't fall for it.
Well, look, it's a read. Okay, RPO is a read, which means if you don't get your read to throw the ball, you're gonna hand it off. And I bet you, if I had run the RPO system, I would have handed the ball off more often than not.
45 touchdown passes. 40.
All right.
You want a number? I'm not going to give you a number. I'll take it. I'll go back. I'll go down to 20.
So
turn the tables.
So maybe really quickly. Maybe I'm misremembering this, but I thought I remembered in that game. So maybe this was called before, because I thought I remembered you in that season having a play where it looked like you were running a read option with a guy running up the middle, and then you would roll out to the outside, and then I thought I remember times where you would then throw it to a receiver. Was that all called beforehand?
I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay. It's a read play. It's a designed run. We call it zone read, and I think I'm okay to reveal that.
Okay.
Because we've been running it forever now. It's called zone read, so we're reading a guy to give the ball or take the ball, and if I take the ball, I have the option to throw the ball.
Okay.
There's a pitch key out there, and that's what you saw. So
Gotcha.
If I pulled, and then I have a second read, and then the second read tells me whether or not I'm going to throw it or run it myself.
Gotcha, but that's
so
not,
it's more of a rollout with a pass option and not as.
That's not the same as a RPO then.
No.
Okay.
No. No.
Okay.
Similar, not a true RPO.
Gotcha. All right.
Okay, so let's talk about the title.
I just learned so much. Now,
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I'm
That's
just
okay.
excited.
There's so many other things besides this season that I want to talk about with Matthew, but I feel like we're talking about the season so much, and that's totally fine.
I'm good
it's
with it.
Super interesting. But the title game. So I would say the general opinion was that even though you guys had gone through the gauntlet, you had been playing really well, it was obvious that you guys were clicking on all cylinders, Royal was heavily favored in this game. So going into it, and then you guys you start a little slow. Royal gets up big. I think the score was like 21-7 or something at some point like that.
21-10.
Okay, so was that game, was there a turning point, or what was the turning point in that game?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's funny because he was a transfer from Elma.
Helms?
Helms. Drew
Yeah.
Helms, yeah. We were down 21-10. I think I don't know if we punted or if we kicked off or whatever, but Royal was just running the ball down our throats. And they continued to do that all the way to like the 10-yard line. And then somehow we got to stop. And it's 4th down, and they're going to kick a field goal. And Drew Helms goes through the A gap and blocks the field goal. Elma transfer.
Yep.
We weren't supposed to have him.
It was a sneaky one, too.
It was.
Just not sneaky in the sense that it was underhanded, but sneaky in the sense that nobody knew it was going to happen until like the first practice, and then he showed up there and was like, "Hey, I transferred."
Yeah, he blocked that field goal, and from that point on, because they didn't score again in the first half, and it was history. So that's my turning point. A lot of people will point to the Hail Mary, of course.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a huge play that gave you guys your first.
But
lead.
I don't call it the turning point. I always call the blocked field goal the turning point because they go up. I mean, they're up 2 scores at that point, but they would go up 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
At that point in time, which is bigger than a touchdown, a 2-point, and a field goal.
And that makes sense that you would. That's really cool because I never, like we said, most people point towards the Hail Mary, but that was almost like the completion of the comeback.
Right. The first half comeback.
Yeah, the first half comeback. But the turning point would have had to have been before that. So that's really interesting to find that out.
So tell me about the Hail Mary, because when you watch it, like, it's a pretty well-designed play where, if I'm remembering it correctly, you got guys bunched up in the front of the end zone. Richard Smith kind of sneaks out towards the back. Is that right?
No, it's not. And
okay.
Well, first off, you picked me as the historical athlete of the week a little while back.
Yeah.
And that's how this entire thing came about. So I just wanted to thank you guys for doing that. First off, I forgot to do that.
Oh, I had to fight Daniel for that one. He didn't want to pick you.
It's okay.
So you're welcome.
I don't blame
He hates
you. It's all right.
Montesano.
No, don't worry about it. And you described that play during that show,
And I did it really wrong.
I was upset because,
Sorry.
but it's okay. Don't worry about it. What we did was we went. The formation is trips right bunch open, but our personnel was flipped around. So we put Benny O isolated one-on-one to the left, and the bunch was to the right.
And Ohashi's your number 1 receiver.
I think that's how we thought of it at that point in time. Yeah, and we rolled out, and it's pretty much a true Hail Mary, but Richard was actually supposed to be in the middle. Shad and Elliot were supposed to split him. One was supposed to be in the back, one was supposed to be in front, and Richard is supposed to tip the ball up because Hail Mary passes are all about you got to get a tip. If you don't get a tip, you're most likely it's going to be incomplete. So his job was to tip it forward or backward based on what he saw, unless he could catch it. And he was in the wrong spot, technically, but he caught it because he got behind him. And it's called 80 Idaho tip is the play call. But if you can catch it, you catch it.
Boy, I had that really wrong.
Well, you had what it looked like. Yeah. Because that's what it looked like, but not what it was supposed to be.
Interesting. But that's
funny.
That was crazy too, because like that was as time expired, right? That was the last play of the half.
Yeah,
so
and we got the 2-point.
So you guys were starting to flow in a better direction. You had cut it to a 1-possession game, and then most of the time you'd think, 42 yards to go, last play. Probably not much going to happen. Then all of a sudden, you take the lead. How did that affect your momentum in the second half? Or did you feel like that you came out in the second half thinking, hey, it's a 1-point game, basically a new ball game?
Yeah, that's mostly how we thought about it. I mean, coming from halftime, people talk about momentum going into halftime, but I think you really only have momentum if you're up a few scores. Mm-hmm. Because if it's a tight game, it's all about adjustments and who can execute those adjustments better come the second half. And so we were focused on that, and we were focused on the fact that it was a new ball game mostly. And we were also pretty upset because the 2-point conversion, we had this awesome trick play drawn up in practice that week, or maybe it was a couple weeks prior, but we'd never run it. And so we were psyched to run it. It was a throwback to the quarterback. And this is where I am going to be braggadocious because we didn't – it was called incomplete, but I did catch it. and I'm upset about it.
I'm going to go back and watch
Yeah, it was. I thought about bringing film, but I didn't know if you guys wanted that. It was. I threw it to Elliot on a little screen to the right, and he was, supposed to fake like he was gonna run, but I was like, Murph, you're gonna get killed. These guys are gonna murder you because they're gonna be all over you. So you might want to just like get ready to chuck it. And so basically, he got murdered. He chucked it in the air right at the goal line, and I dove and I caught it like this, and I rolled away from the referee who called it incomplete.
Ugh.
And I regret that because he called it incomplete, and I think it's because he didn't see the catch. But it was for sure a catch, and I'm on record saying that. I'm upset at that guy. I don't know who he is. I don't know where he is. I don't know if he's ever going to hear this. But I want him to know,
even though you guys won,
that he was wrong.
Okay, so you guys ended up winning semi-comfortably. What was it? You guys win by like...
It's 43-28.
43-28. So what was the point where during the game it clicked in your head that, holy crap, we're going to win the state title?
There was no point.
Not until the clock went to zeros.
Yeah, actually, we got in our T formation, because that's our victory formation, and the guys in the backfield get to go in 4-point stances. So that's why we do that, because it's fun and it's funny. And they were like, wow, we're gonna take this knee, and we did it. And I yelled at them because they were like talking to each other and getting all happy. And I was like, stop, stop. I might fumble the snap or something crazy. Stop. I got pretty. I mean, I was mad at them, and I shouldn't have been. But
it was a tense moment.
Yeah, I was like, shut up. We got to do this, and then we did.
So the last question about the title game is just to sum up like the emotion. We've already mentioned that was Coach Dad. Your head coach was your dad. How long had your dad been coaching you in football?
Define coaching, because I mean, we worked on footwork, midline footwork in the living room for I mean when I was a freshman, and before that I was going to quarterback camps. Like, I was bred to do this.
Yeah.
Which sounds braggadocious.
So basically your whole life your dad's been coaching you.
Yeah, he when I was first born, he put like a plush football in my crib.
There you go. Okay.
I held a plush football.
So you have a lifetime of coaching from your dad. I'm going to assume, just knowing what your dad is like as a coach, that there was a lot of hard work. So blood, sweat, and tears over the course of these 18 years that lead up to this moment. Just what did it mean to you? How big of a deal was it for in your senior season to be able to celebrate at the end of that game with your dad?
Well, it was, to put it lightly, it was a big deal, and it meant a whole heck of a lot. But it meant more to me because he hadn't won one yet, and he deserved, out of anybody, to win one. He deserved to win one, so I'm mostly happy that we could do it for him, because I mean, he's in like 3 Hall of Fames now as a coach, and to do that even without it, well, I think that happened after the title, but he deserved to be in it even without one, and now that he has one, it's almost like he doesn't need to prove anything anymore, and I'm happy I could do that for him.
That's amazing. I think every father hopes they can have. And most fathers will never have a moment quite like that with their son. It's pretty amazing. So you guys fought through. You were able to win it for your dad. You were able to do something great for the community. Just to kind of sum it up, you go from the beginning of the season. It's a rocky start. Expectations from the outside are low. You guys lose your grandstands. You missed some home games and had to play at other stadiums, but you fought through all of it. Huge run all the way to the title game and a win. So 8 years late, congratulations.
Thanks.